The sound of a single gunshot echoed across the dusty plains of Colorado Territory. 1876. As Zara Anderson clutched her 3-year-old son Ellie tightly to her chest and ran toward the small cabin she called home. Blood trickled down her arm where the bullet had grazed her, but the pain was nothing compared to the fear coursing through her veins. They were coming. The same men who had murdered her husband 6 months ago were now after her child. Zara burst through the cabin door, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She had mere minutes, if that. The Blackwell Gang never gave up once they set their sights on something or someone. Setting Ellie down, she rushed to the loose floorboard where she kept her husband's revolver and the meager savings she'd managed to hide away. "Mama hurt." Ellie's small voice quivered as he pointed to her bleeding arm. "It's just a scratch, sweetheart," Zara whispered, forcing a smile. "We need to be very quiet now." "Can you do that for Mama?" The boy nodded solemnly, his blue eyes so like his father's, wide with unspoken understanding beyond his years. Zara heard horses approaching and quickly extinguished the lamp. Through the crack in the curtains, she could make out 5 riders approaching in the fading light. "Come out, Mrs. Anderson," a gruff voice called. "We ain't here to hurt you, just want to talk about that boy of yours." Zara's blood ran cold. Ever since Ellie had witnessed the gang killing that traveling businessman 3 weeks ago, they'd been hunting them. A child witness was still a witness, and the Blackwell Gang left no witnesses. "There's nowhere to run." Another voice shouted as the men dismounted. "Hank Blackwell sends his regards." Zara counted the seconds, weighing her options. The cabin had no back door. The nearest neighbor was 2 miles away. With a trembling hand, she checked the revolver. 5 bullets. Not enough. The front door splintered under the force of a boot. Zara fired a warning shot through the window, gratified to hear a yelp of surprise from one of the men. "You got 1 minute to send that boy out, or we burn this place to the ground with you in it," the leader shouted. "You'll never touch my son," Zara yelled back, her voice steadier than she felt. She heard the men conferring outside, then the unmistakable smell of kerosene wafted through the air. They were going to make good on their threat. Zara scooped up Ellie and moved to the small window at the back of the cabin. It would be a tight fit, but Ellie could escape through it. "Listen to me, sweetheart," she whispered urgently. "I need you to be brave. When I put you through this window, you run to the big rock by the creek and hide there. Don't come out until I come get you. You understand?" Ellie nodded, his lower lip trembling. "But Mama come too." "I'll be right behind you," she lied, kissing his forehead. "I promise." As she lifted him toward the window, the front door crashed open. Zara spun around, placing herself between the intruders and her son. 3 men stood in the doorway, their faces shadowed beneath wide-brimmed hats. The leader stepped forward, revealing a cruel smile beneath his bushy mustache. "Mrs. Anderson, don't make this harder than it needs to be," he said, his voice deceptively gentle. "Hand over the boy and you can walk away." "Over my dead body," Zara growled, aiming her revolver. The man sighed dramatically. "That can certainly be arranged." A shot rang out, but it hadn't come from Zara's gun. The leader staggered backward, clutching his shoulder. Confusion flashed across his face as he tumbled to his knees. More gunfire erupted outside, followed by shouts and the sound of horses whinnying in panic. The other 2 men in the doorway turned, drawing their weapons. "What the hell?" one of them muttered just before another shot caught him square in the chest. The third man fired wildly toward the darkness outside before a bullet found him too. Zara remained frozen, her gun still raised, heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear anything else. A tall figure appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the twilight sky. Zara's finger tensed on the trigger. "Madam, are you and the boy all right?" The voice was deep but gentle, Carrying the slightest hint of a southern drawl, the stranger stepped into the cabin, holstering his gun. In the dim light, Zara could make out a lean, weathered face beneath a dust-covered hat. His clothes were trail-worn but neat, and his eyes, startlingly blue against his sun-darkened skin, held nothing but concern. "Who are you?" Zara demanded, her gun still pointed at him. "Name's Jack Porter," he replied, keeping his hands visible. "I've been tracking the Blackwell Gang for 3 weeks. Didn't expect to find them threatening a woman and child." He glanced at the men on the floor. "This isn't all of them. There were 2 more outside they're taken care of, but we should move quickly. More might be coming." Illy peered out from behind Zara's skirts. "Did you shoot the bad men?" he asked with childish directness. A flicker of something pain perhaps crossed Jack's face. "Yes, son, I did." "They won't hurt you or your mama now." Zara hesitated, her mind racing. This stranger had saved them, but trusting anyone after what she'd been through seemed impossible. Still, they couldn't stay here. "Why were you tracking them?" she asked, slowly lowering her weapon. "I'm a bounty hunter, madam. These men have prices on their heads." He paused, then added more softly, "And they killed someone I cared about." There was truth in his eyes, Zara decided, and right now truth was all she had to go on. "We need to leave," she said, finally lowering the revolver completely. "They'll send more men when these don't return." Jack nodded. "My camp's about an hour's ride from here. It's well hidden. You'll be safe there while we figure out what to do next." Zara quickly gathered their essentials: food, clothes, her husband's pocket watch, the small pouch of coins, and a worn photograph of better days. Jack helped her saddle her mare, then lifted Illy onto his own sturdy palomino before mounting behind him. As they rode away from the cabin, Zara looked back once at the home she and her late husband Thomas had built with such hope. In the growing darkness, she could just make out the bodies of the men who had threatened everything she loved. "Thank you," she said quietly to Jack as they rode side by side. "Don't thank me yet, Mrs. Anderson. We've got a long way to go." The night was surprisingly cold for late spring, the stars brilliant in the vast Colorado sky. They rode in silence except for Illy's occasional question, which Jack answered with surprising patience for a hardened bounty hunter. "Why do those men want to hurt us?" Illy eventually asked, his small voice carrying in the quiet night. Jack glanced at Zara, unsure how much the child knew. She nodded slightly, giving him permission to explain. "Sometimes bad men don't want anyone telling on them when they do wrong," Jack said simply. "But they don't understand that running from what they did just makes things worse." "Like when I broke Mama's cup and hid it?" Illy asked innocently. Despite everything, Zara found herself smiling. "Something like that, sweetheart." Jack's camp was nestled in a small canyon, invisible from the trail. A creek gurgled nearby, and Jack had constructed a lean-to shelter against a rock face. It wasn't much, but it was defendable. Zara noted with approval that it offered clear views in all directions. "It ain't much, but it's secure," Jack said, helping Illy down from the horse. "We'll rest tonight and make a plan in the morning." Zara nodded, exhaustion suddenly weighing on her like a physical burden. The adrenaline that had kept her going was fading, leaving only bone-deep weariness and the throbbing pain in her arm. Jack noticed her discomfort. "You're hurt," he said, frowning. "Let me take a look at that." "It's just a graze," Zara insisted, but allowed him to examine the wound by the small campfire he built. His hands were surprisingly gentle for their size and roughness. He cleaned the wound with whiskey from his saddlebag, which stung fiercely, then bandaged it with a strip of clean cloth. "You've done this before," Zara observed. "Spent 2 years as a field medic during the war," Jack replied, securing the bandage. "Learned more about patching people up than I ever wanted to know." Ellie had already curled up in the bedroll Jack provided, exhaustion claiming him despite the evening's excitement. Zara watched her son's peaceful face, marveling at children's resilience. "Why is the Blackwell Gang after your boy?" Jack asked quietly, handing Zara a tin cup of coffee. She took a sip, welcoming the bitter warmth. "3 weeks ago, we were returning from town when we saw them murder a businessman from Denver, I think. They didn't see us at first, but Ali," he called out, startled by what he'd seen. She closed her eyes, remembering the moment of pure terror when the outlaws had looked up and spotted them. "We got away that day, but they've been hunting us ever since." "The businessman was probably Augustus Fleming," Jack said grimly, "railroad investor. His company hired me to bring in his killers." He stared into the fire. "Though truth be told, I would have hunted them anyway." "You mentioned they killed someone you cared about," Zara said cautiously. Jack was silent for so long that she thought he wouldn't answer. When he did, his voice was low and heavy with memory. "My brother. He was a sheriff in a small town in Arizona Territory. Hank Blackwell and his gang robbed the bank there last year. My brother tried to stop them." Jack's fingers tightened around his coffee cup. "They didn't just kill him, they made an example of him." "I'm sorry," Zara said softly. "My husband Thomas, they killed him too, 6 months ago." Jack looked up sharply. "The Blackwell Gang killed your husband," Zara nodded. "Thomas was a mining engineer. He discovered that the Blackwells were running a claim-jumping operation in the hills. They were forcing legitimate miners off their claims, sometimes killing them, then taking the gold for themselves." She swallowed hard. "Thomas was gathering evidence to take to the territorial governor. They found out. And now they are after your son because he witnessed another of their crimes," Jack concluded. "These men don't leave loose ends." "What are we going to do?" Zara asked, hating the quaver in her voice but unable to suppress it. For 6 months, she'd been strong for Ellie, for herself, but tonight the weight of it all threatened to crush her. "First, we rest," Jack said firmly. "Tomorrow, we need to get you and your boy somewhere safe while I finish dealing with the Blackwells." "No," Zara said, surprising both of them with her vehemence. "I won't just hide while someone else fights my battles. These men killed my husband and threatened my child. I want to see justice done." Jack studied her face in the firelight. "It's not about fighting your battles, Mrs. Anderson. It's about keeping your boy safe." "Zara," she corrected him. "And Ellie will never be safe as long as the Blackwell Gang exists. They don't forget and they don't forgive." Jack nodded slowly. "All right, Zara, we'll figure something out in the morning. For now, you should sleep. I'll keep watch." Zara wanted to argue that she could take a turn on watch, but exhaustion was making her eyelids heavy. She checked on Ellie once more, then settled into the second bedroll Jack had provided, positioned so she could see her son even as she slept. Just before sleep claimed her, she heard Jack say softly, "I promise you, they won't touch your boy. Not while I'm breathing." It was the most comforting thing she'd heard in 6 long months. Dawn broke clear and cold, painting the canyon walls with pale gold light. Zara woke instantly, years of frontier life having trained her to transition from sleep to full alertness in seconds. Ellie still slept peacefully, but Jack's bedroll was empty. For a moment, panic seized her had he abandoned them. Then she caught the scent of coffee and bacon. Jack was crouched by the small fire, cooking breakfast with the practiced efficiency of a man accustomed to trail life. He looked up as she sat up. "Morning," he said quietly, mindful of Ellie's slumber. "Hope you're hungry." "Starving," Zara admitted, running fingers through her tangled hair in a futile attempt to make herself presentable. She was suddenly conscious of her disheveled appearance, the dirt from their escape, the blood on her sleeve, the fact that she'd slept in her clothes. Jack either didn't notice or politely pretended not to. He handed her a tin plate with bacon and beans. "It's not fancy, but it'll keep you going." "Thank you," Zara said, accepting the food gratefully. "Did you sleep at all?" "Got a few hours," Jack replied, though the shadows under his eyes suggested otherwise. "Been thinking about our next move." Zara ate quickly, surprised by her own appetite. "And what have you decided?" "The way I see it, we have two options," Jack said, pouring her coffee. "I can take you and Ellie to the nearest town with a decent sheriff, probably Denver, and continue hunting the Blackwells myself. Or," he hesitated. "Or," Zara prompted, "or we draw them to us on our terms where we have the advantage." Zara stared at him. "You want to use us as bait?" "Not exactly," Jack clarified. "But the Blackwells are already hunting you. Right now, they're dictating the terms of that hunt. I'm suggesting we flip that around." Before Zara could respond, Ellie stirred, rubbing his eyes with small fists. "Mama," he called, his voice still thick with sleep. "I'm here, sweetheart," Zara said, moving to his side immediately. "Look, Mr. Porter made us breakfast. Are you hungry?" The boy nodded enthusiastically, and Jack handed him a plate with a smaller portion of bacon and beans. Ellie dug in with the hearty appetite of childhood, seemingly unbothered by yesterday's events in the light of day. "After we eat, we should move," Jack said. "This camp is secure, but it's best not to stay in one place too long." "Where will we go?" Zara asked. "I know a place about a day's ride from here. An old mining cabin that belongs to a friend of mine. It's remote, defensible, and unknown to most folks." They broke camp efficiently after breakfast, leaving minimal evidence of their presence. Jack helped Zara onto her horse, then lifted Ellie up to sit in front of her. As they rode out of the canyon, Zara noticed how Jack constantly scanned their surroundings, alert to any sign of pursuit. "How many men does Hank Blackwell have?" she asked as they made their way across a high meadow dotted with spring wildflowers. "Used to be a dozen or so," Jack replied. "I've accounted for 5 so far, including the 3 last night, so there's Hank and maybe 6 others still out there." 7 against 2, Zara murmured. Jack glanced at her. "You counting yourself in this fight?" "I told you I want justice," she said firmly. "Besides, I'm a better shot than you might think. Thomas made sure of that." Jack nodded approvingly. "Good man, your husband." "The best," Zara said softly, then shook herself. Dwelling on grief wouldn't help them now. But 7 against 2 are still poor odds. "Which is why we need a plan, not just guns," Jack agreed. "And maybe a few more good people on our side." They rode steadily throughout the day, stopping only briefly to rest the horses and eat a cold lunch of jerky and hardtack. Ellie remained remarkably good-natured throughout the journey, asking Jack endless questions about his horse, his guns, and what it was like to be a bounty hunter. "Do you catch bad guys all the time?" Ellie asked, riding now with Jack to give Zara's horse a break from the double burden. "Not all the time," Jack answered honestly. "Sometimes the bad guys are real good at hiding." "But you found the ones who were chasing us," Ellie pointed out with a child's simple logic. "That I did," Jack agreed, a smile warming his normally stern features, "and I'm mighty glad of it." Zara watched the interaction with mixed emotions. It was good to see Ellie comfortable with Jack. The boy needed a male figure he could trust after losing his father. But it also made her heart ache for what they'd lost. Thomas would never teach his son to fish or ride or become a man. The sun was beginning to set when they finally approached their destination. The cabin was nestled against a hillside, with tall pines providing additional cover. It was larger than Zara had expected, a proper 2-room structure with a stone chimney and solid walls. "Your friend built this well," Zara commented as they dismounted. "He was particular about things being done right," Jack said, a note of sadness in his voice that made Zara wonder about this unnamed friend. "Let me check inside first, make sure it's secure." Jack drew his pistol and approached the cabin cautiously, every movement betraying his experience in dangerous situations. Zara kept Illy close, her own hand near the revolver tucked in her belt. After a moment, Jack signaled that all was clear, and they brought the horses to the small corral at the side of the cabin. Inside, the cabin was dusty but otherwise in good condition. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and simple furniture, a table, chairs, a bed in the main room, and another in the smaller back room stood ready for use. "This is perfect," Zara said, already mentally organizing how they would make this their temporary home. "It's not much, but it'll serve," Jack replied, lighting a lantern he found on a shelf. "There's a root cellar out back with some preserved food, and the creek has good water." As Jack built a fire in the fireplace, Zara unpacked their meager belongings and settled Illy with his wooden horse to play. The simple domestic activities felt strangely normal, as if they were just a family settling in for the evening, not fugitives planning how to outfox murderous outlaws. "When did you last see Hank Blackwell?" Zara asked as they sat down to a simple dinner of beans, salt pork, and canned peaches from the root cellar. Jack's expression darkened. "About a week ago, from a distance. He was in a mining town called Silver Creek, about 30 miles south of here. He and his remaining men have been moving around, never staying in one place too long." "Just like us," Zara observed. "Difference is they're predators. We're prey," Jack said bluntly. "At least that's how they see it." After dinner, when Illy had been tucked into the bed in the small back room and had fallen asleep, Zara and Jack sat by the fire, speaking in low voices. "I've been thinking about what you said drawing them to us," Zara said, nursing a cup of coffee. "How would we do that?" Jack leaned forward, his face serious in the firelight. "We need to make them think they've found you by accident, not design. Let them believe they have the upper hand. And how do we do that? There's a town about 15 miles from here, Prosperity. Small place, but it's got a general store, a saloon, and a telegraph office. If word were to reach the Blackwells that a woman and child matching your descriptions had been seen there." Jack let the implication hang. Zara considered this. "You want to spread rumors about us being there?" "Exactly, but we'd be here, waiting and prepared." Jack pulled out a rough map he'd drawn on a piece of paper. "The trail from Silver Creek to Prosperity passes within 2 miles of this cabin. We'd have warning of their approach. And then what? We just shoot them as they pass by." Zara asked skeptically. Jack shook his head. "No, we need to draw them in, separate them if possible, make them come to us one or two at a time, not as a group." Zara was quiet for a moment, thinking through the implications. "It's risky." "Less risky than waiting for them to find us or trying to outrun them indefinitely," Jack pointed out. "They won't stop looking, Zara, not until they're dead or you and Illy are." The blunt truth of his words settled heavily on her shoulders. "All right," she said finally, "but I have conditions. First, if things go wrong, Illy's safety comes before anything else, before justice, before revenge, before even my life." "Agreed," Jack said without hesitation. "Second, I want you to teach me everything you can about defending this place. I won't be helpless if it comes to a fight." Jack nodded. "I can do that. And third," Zara hesitated, then met his gaze directly, "I want your word that if something happens to me, you'll make sure Illy gets to my sister in San Francisco. She's the only family we have left." Jack's blue eyes held hers steadily. "You have my word, Zara." "But it won't come to that. We're going to end this, and you and Illy will have a life without fear." Something in his voice, absolute conviction, perhaps made Zara believe him, despite the odds against them. For the first time in 6 months, she felt a flicker of hope. "Thank you, Jack," she said softly, "for everything." He looked slightly uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Just doing what needs doing," he said gruffly. "You should get some rest. Tomorrow we start preparing." Zara nodded and rose, suddenly aware of her exhaustion. As she headed toward the back room to sleep nearly, she paused and looked back at Jack, still sitting by the fire. "Jack," he looked up. "Why are you really doing this? It can't just be the bounty." Jack was silent for a long moment, staring into the flames. "Because when I look at you and Illy, I see what my brother fought for, decent folks just trying to live their lives without fear. And because some debts can't be paid with money." The simple honesty of his answer touched something deep in Zara's heart. She nodded once, unable to find words, then slipped into the back room. That night, she dreamt not of pursuit and danger, but of a future where she and Illy were safe, where they could build a new life free from the shadow of the past. And in that dream, Jack Porter was never far away. The next 5 days passed in a blur of activity. True to his word, Jack taught Zara everything he could about defending the cabin. They set up defensive positions, planned escape routes, and practiced shooting at targets Jack set up in the clearing behind the cabin. To Zara's surprise, Jack was a patient teacher who seemed genuinely impressed with her abilities. "You're a natural," he commented after she hit a series of difficult targets. "Your husband taught you well." "Thomas believed women should be able to protect themselves," Zara replied, reloading the revolver with practiced ease. "Especially out here." "Smart man," Jack said approvingly. "Most fellows I know wouldn't think that way." "Thomas wasn't most men," Zara said with a sad smile. "He believed in equality, said his mother raised him right." Jack nodded thoughtfully. "My mother was the same way. Tougher than saddle leather but fair as springtime. Raised me and my brother alone after our pa died in a mining accident." These small exchanges of personal history became a regular part of their days. Between setting traps, reinforcing the cabin's defenses, and caring for Illy, Zara found herself sharing more of her past with Jack, and he with her. She learned that he had been a cavalry scout before the war, then a Union soldier, and later a Texas Ranger before turning to bounty hunting. He spoke little of the war itself, but the shadows that crossed his face told Zara enough. In turn, she told him about growing up in Boston, the daughter of a schoolteacher who'd instilled in her a love of books and learning. How she'd met Thomas when he came to lecture at her father's school on geological formations, and how his passion for the West had kindled her own desire for adventure. "Never thought I'd end up in a besieged cabin planning an ambush, though," she admitted on the third night as they sat by the fire after Illy had gone to bed. Jack chuckled, a warm sound she'd come to appreciate. "Life has a way of taking unexpected turns." "It certainly does," Zara agreed, thinking of all she'd lost and perhaps what she might yet gain. She caught herself watching Jack's hands as he cleaned his rifle, admiring their strength and capability, and quickly looked away. On the fourth day, Jack rode into Prosperity to set their plan in motion. He returned that evening with supplies and news. "I spread the word as planned," he reported as they stored the flour, coffee, sugar, and ammunition he'd purchased. "Made sure to mention it to the bartender at the saloon fellow who never met a piece of gossip he didn't like." "How long do you think before word reaches the Blackwells?" Zara asked. "A day, maybe 2. Depends on who's carrying tales," Jack said, hanging his hat on a peg by the door. "I also sent a telegram to the territorial marshal in Denver, letting him know what we're planning. If all goes well, he'll arrive with deputies after it's done to make things official." "And if all doesn't go well?" Zara asked quietly. Jack's expression was grim. "Then he'll know where to start looking for bodies." Illy, who had been helping unpack the supplies with the solemnity of a child given an important task, looked up. "Are the bad men coming back, Mr. Jack?" Jack knelt down to Ellie's level, his face softening as it always did when he addressed the boy. "They might, partner, but remember what I told you about the special hiding place," Ellie nodded earnestly. "Under the floor in the root cellar. And stay quiet like a mouse until you or Mama comes to get me." "That's right," Jack said, ruffling the boy's hair. "You're a brave young man, you know that," Ellie puffed up at the praise. "Papa said I was brave too." Jack glanced at Zara, who stood watching them with a lump in her throat. "Your papa was right," he said gently to Ellie. "Now, want to help me feed the horses?" As Jack and Ellie headed outside, Zara busied herself preparing dinner, trying to ignore the growing knot of anxiety in her stomach. The trap was set. Now all they could do was wait. On the morning of the 6th day, the wait ended. Jack was chopping wood behind the cabin while Zara hung laundry on a line strung between two pines. Ellie was helping by handing her clothespins from a basket. It was a deceptively peaceful domestic scene. Suddenly, Jack froze, the axe held motionless in mid-swing. Zara instantly recognized his posture. He was listening intently. "Get inside," he said quietly, setting the axe down with deliberate care. "Now." Zara didn't question him. She scooped up Ellie and hurried into the cabin, Jack following close behind. Once inside, he went straight to the window, keeping to one side to avoid being silhouetted. "Riders," he confirmed grimly. "Coming from the South Trail, at least 4, maybe more." Zara's heart began to race, but her hands remained steady as she checked her revolver. "Blackwell's men. Can't be sure yet, but who else would it be?" Jack moved with quick efficiency, gathering their pre-arranged supplies: extra ammunition, water, food. "Ellie, sweetheart," Zara said, kneeling before her son. "Remember the hiding place Mr. Jack showed you? It's time to use it." Ellie's lower lip trembled slightly, but he nodded bravely. "Is it the bad men?" "We think so," Zara answered honestly. "But Mr. Jack and I are going to make sure they can't hurt you. You just need to stay hidden, no matter what you hear. Can you do that?" "Yes, Mama," he whispered. Jack had already moved the rug and opened the trapdoor that led to the root cellar. He helped Ellie down the ladder, then showed him the false wall. They'd prepared a small, concealed space just big enough for a child to hide in, supplied with a blanket, water, and even Ellie's wooden horse for comfort. "Remember, not a sound," Jack reminded him, his voice gentle but firm. "No matter what happens, stay put until one of us comes for you." "What if nobody comes?" Ellie asked, the simple question cutting straight to Zara's heart. Jack didn't flinch from the truth. "Then you wait until nightfall, then follow the creek downstream like I showed you. It'll take you to prosperity. Ask for Sheriff Mills." Ellie's eyes filled with tears, but he blinked them away, trying to be brave. "I don't want you and Mama to die like Papa did." Zara fought back her own tears as she embraced her son. "We'll be fine, my brave boy. I promise we'll come back for you." After one last hug, they closed the false wall, hiding Ellie completely. Jack gave Zara's shoulder a reassuring squeeze as they climbed back up to the cabin. "He'll be safe there," Jack said. "They'd have to tear the place apart to find him." Zara nodded, trying to take comfort in that fact. "How long until they reach us?" 10 minutes, maybe less," Jack estimated, moving to check the windows again. "I count 5 riders, not the full gang, but enough to be trouble." They moved quickly, implementing the defense plan they'd practiced. Jack positioned himself by the front window where he had a clear shot at the approach to the cabin. Zara took the side window, covering the path to the corral. "Remember," Jack said as they settled into position, "let them get close. Don't fire until I do. We need to make every shot count." Zara nodded, her mouth dry with anticipation. The minutes ticked by in tense silence. Finally, the sound of approaching horses reached them. Jack peered carefully around the window frame. "It's them," he confirmed in a low voice. "Hank Blackwell himself is in front. Recognize him from the wanted posters." Zara's grip tightened on her revolver. The man who had ordered her husband's death was here, within reach of justice at last. "Steady," Jack murmured, sensing her tension. "Let them make the first mistake." Outside, the riders slowed as they approached the clearing. Zara could hear their voices now, though not the words. Then a loud, commanding voice called out, "Hello, the cabin. Anyone home?" Neither Jack nor Zara responded. They'd agreed on silence as part of their strategy. "We know you're in there, Mrs. Anderson," the voice continued. "Got word you were spotted in town. No need to make this difficult. We just want to talk about what your boy saw." Jack caught Zara's eye and nodded toward the rear of the cabin. As they'd planned, she slipped away from her window and moved silently to the back door while Jack remained at his post. Outside, Hank Blackwell was losing patience. "Last chance to do this peaceable-like," he shouted. "Send the boy out and we'll be on our way." Zara reached the back door, eased it open a crack, and peered out. As expected, two of the riders had dismounted and were circling around to cover the rear of the cabin. She waited, counting their steps as they approached. At the front of the cabin, Jack finally responded to Blackwell's demands. "The woman and boy aren't your concern anymore, Blackwell," he called out. "You're trespassing on private property. I suggest you turn around and ride away while you still can." There was a moment of startled silence, then Blackwell's angry reply. "Who the hell are you?" "Name's Jack Porter. You murdered my brother in Arizona last year. I've come to return the favor." Blackwell's laugh was ugly. "Porter, is it? Your brother died squealing like a stuck pig, begged for mercy right up to the end." Jack didn't rise to the bait. Zara could imagine his face calm, controlled, hiding the rage she knew he must feel. That controlled focus was what had kept them alive this far. At the back of the cabin, the two outlaws had reached the door. Zara heard one whisper to the other, "On three, we rush in. 1, 2. She fired through the crack in the door before they reached 3. Her first shot caught the nearer man in the chest. He dropped without a sound. The second man dove for cover, returning fire wildly. Wood splintered beside Zara's head as a bullet tore through the door. At the front of the cabin, all hell broke loose. Jack's rifle cracked repeatedly, answered by gunfire from Blackwell and his remaining men. Zara heard horses whinnying in panic, the thud of bodies hitting the ground, and Blackwell shouting orders to his men. She focused on her immediate threat, the outlaw firing at the back door. She waited until his firing paused, then risked a quick glance through the damaged door. He was crouched behind a water barrel, reloading. Zara took careful aim and fired twice. Her second shot caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. He staggered but kept his feet, raising his pistol again. Zara's third shot hit him squarely between the eyes. "Zara, status," Jack called from the front room, using the military terminology he'd taught her. "2 down at the back." She replied, already moving to rejoin him as planned. In the main room, she found Jack kneeling by the window, blood seeping from a graze on his forearm. Outside, one body lay sprawled on the ground. The remaining 2 men, including Blackwell, had taken cover behind the water trough by the corral. "They're pinned down," Jack reported grimly, "but we're in a standoff. Blackwell knows he can't rush us, but we can't get a clear shot at him either." "What about circling around behind them?" Zara suggested, tearing a strip from her petticoat to bind Jack's wound. He shook his head. "Too risky. No cover between here and there. They'd see you coming." A voice called from outside. "Porter, you've got grit, I'll give you that, but you're outnumbered and surrounded." Jack snorted. "He's bluffing. There's just the 2 of them left." "Let me talk to the woman," Blackwell shouted. "Mrs. Anderson, your husband died quick. I made sure of that personally. Send out the boy and you'll get the same courtesy." White-hot rage flooded Zara at the casual mention of Thomas's murder. Before Jack could stop her, she moved to the window. "My husband was worth 10 of you, Blackwell," she shouted. "And you'll never touch my son." Blackwell's laugh carried across the clearing. "Spirited woman. Thomas always did have good taste. Tell you what, I'll make you a deal, just the boy. You can walk away." "Ignore him," Jack advised quietly. "He's trying to rattle you." Zara nodded, forcing herself to focus. "We need to end this. He can't stay hidden forever." Jack considered their options. "I might be able to get a shot if we give them something else to worry about." "Like what?" His eyes fell on the lantern hanging by the door. "A diversion." Understanding dawned on Zara's face. "The corral, if we could spook the horses." Jack nodded. "Exactly. Their horses are tied to the corral post. If we can start a small fire near there, the animals will panic when Blackwell and his man move to control them." "We'll have our shot," Zara finished, working quickly. Jack prepared a bundle using a rag soaked in lamp oil wrapped around a rock. Zara kept watch, making sure Blackwell and his remaining man stayed in position. "Ready?" Jack asked, a match in hand. Zara nodded, taking up position by the window with her revolver. Jack lit the bundle, then hurled it through the window with impressive accuracy. It landed just behind the corral fence, igniting instantly. The dry grass caught fire immediately, and as predicted, the horses began to panic, pulling at their reins and whinnying in alarm. "The horses!" Blackwell's companion shouted, rising from his position. Jack's rifle cracked and the man fell, clutching his chest. Blackwell, more experienced, kept his head down, but he was now alone and in an impossible position. The fire was spreading, threatening both the horses and his cover. "It's over, Blackwell," Jack called. "Throw out your weapon and stand up with your hands high." For answer, Blackwell fired several wild shots toward the cabin, then made a desperate dash toward the nearest horse. Jack tracked him with his rifle but held his fire. "He's getting away," Zara cried in disbelief. "No, he isn't," Jack said calmly, still watching through his rifle sight. "He's doing exactly what I want him to do." As Blackwell reached the horse and grabbed the reins, Jack squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed across the clearing and Blackwell stumbled, clutching his leg. He fell heavily to the ground but still managed to drag himself behind the water trough again. "Wounded, not dead," Jack reported, ejecting the spent cartridge. "I want him alive if possible. He needs to hang for what he's done." "Porter," Blackwell's voice was strained now, tight with pain. "This doesn't end here. I've got more men coming." "Another bluff," Jack said to Zara. "He's desperate." The fire had spread to the edge of the corral now. Soon it would reach the cabin if they didn't deal with it. Jack glanced at Zara. "I need to end this and put out that fire," he said grimly. "Cover me. If he raises his head, shoot him." Before Zara could protest, Jack was moving. He slipped out the back door, circling wide to approach the water trough from the side, using the smoke from the growing fire as cover. Zara kept her revolver trained on Blackwell's position, heart hammering in her chest. The seconds stretched like hours as she waited for either Jack or Blackwell to make a move. Suddenly, Blackwell rose slightly, trying to get a better view through the smoke. Zara fired immediately, her bullet splintering the edge of the trough inches from his head. He ducked down again, cursing. Then Jack was there, emerging from the smoke like an avenging spirit. Before Blackwell could react, Jack was upon him, kicking away his gun and dragging him into the open. "Hank Blackwell," Jack announced formally, pressing the outlaw face down into the dirt with a knee in his back. "You're under arrest for the murders of Sheriff William Porter, Thomas Anderson, and at least a dozen others. You'll hang for your crimes." Blackwell struggled weakly, but between his wounded leg and Jack's iron grip, he had no chance of escape. As Jack bound the outlaw's hands behind his back, Zara hurried from the cabin with a bucket of water to help control the fire. Working together, they managed to extinguish the flames before they spread to the cabin or the surrounding woods. Only when the last ember had been doused did Zara remember Illy, still hiding in his secret place. "I need to get Illy," she said, dropping the empty bucket and hurrying toward the cabin. "Wait," Jack said, grabbing her arm gently. "Let me secure Blackwell first. I don't want Illy seeing him." Zara nodded gratefully. Jack dragged the cursing outlaw into the cabin and secured him to a heavy chair. Then he nodded to Zara, who hurried to retrieve her son. Illy was exactly where they'd left him, huddled in his hiding place with his wooden horse clutched to his chest. When Zara opened the false wall, his face lit up with such relief that it nearly broke her heart. "Mama," he cried, launching himself into her arms. "I heard lots of shooting. Did the bad men go away?" "Yes, sweetheart," Zara said, holding him tightly. "The bad men can't hurt us anymore. Mr. Jack made sure of that." She carried Illy up from the root cellar, careful to shield his view of Blackwell, who sat glaring at them from his chair. Jack quickly led them outside, away from the bodies and the bound outlaw. "Is it really over?" Zara asked as Illy ran to check on the horses, now calmed and safely tied at a distance from the former fire. Jack nodded, his face showing relief and something else, a lightness she hadn't seen before. "The territorial marshal should arrive tomorrow with deputies. They'll take Blackwell to Denver for trial. Given the number of witnesses against him and his crimes, he'll hang within the month. And the rest of his gang, 3 more unaccounted for," Jack admitted. "But without Blackwell, they'll scatter. Most outlaws are cowards at heart without a strong leader." Zara looked around at the aftermath of the battle, the bodies, the scorched earth, the bullet holes in the cabin walls. "What happens now? To us, I mean." Jack glanced at Illy, who was solemnly explaining to the horses that the bad men wouldn't scare them anymore. When he looked back at Zara, there was uncertainty in his eyes. "That depends," he said carefully. "You mentioned a sister in San Francisco." "Yes, but—" Zara hesitated, suddenly unsure of what she wanted. For months her only goal had been keeping Illy safe. Now that the immediate danger was past, the future stretched before her, full of possibilities and decisions. "The bounty on Blackwell is substantial," Jack continued. "More than enough to give you and Illy a fresh start wherever you choose to go." "Is that what you want?" Zara asked, studying his face. "For us to go to San Francisco?" Jack looked away, his expression unreadable. "I want what's best for you and the boy." "And what about what you want, Jack?" Zara pressed gently. "After this is over, where will you go?" he shrugged, the gesture betraying his discomfort with the question. "Hadn't thought that far ahead. There are always outlaws to hunt. Is that really what you want? To keep hunting and killing until someone faster or luckier gets you instead?" Jack's silence was answer enough. Zara took a deep breath. "In the past week, I've seen a different kind of life possible for Illy and me. Not just surviving, but living. You gave us that, Jack, and—" She faltered, then forged ahead. "I've seen a different kind of man than I thought existed after Thomas died. A man Illy looks up to. A man I've come to—" She stopped, not quite ready to put her feelings into words. Jack looked at her then, hope and caution warring in his eyes. "Zara, I'm not the settling type, never have been." "Have you ever tried?" she challenged. Before he could answer, Illy ran back to them, tugging at Jack's hand. "Mr. Jack, the horses are all better now. Can you teach me to ride the big one like you promised?" Jack's face softened as he looked down at the boy. "Soon, partner. First we need to clean up here and wait for the marshal." Illy nodded solemnly, then looked from Jack to his mother and back again, his young face suddenly serious. "Are you going to go away after the marshal comes?" The simple question hung in the air between them. Jack knelt down to Ellie's level, his face troubled. "Would it bother you if I did?" he asked carefully. Ellie nodded vigorously. "Who would teach me to shoot and ride and track animals? And who would make Mama smile again?" Jack glanced up at Zara, who felt heat rise to her cheeks. Had her feelings been so obvious that even a 3-year-old could see them? "Your mama's pretty good at smiling on her own," Jack said gently. Ellie shook his head with the absolute certainty of childhood. "No. She only started smiling again when you came." Jack seemed at a loss for words. Zara stepped in, placing a hand on Ellie's shoulder. "Sweetheart, why don't you go check if the chickens need feeding? I need to talk to Mr. Jack for a minute." When Ellie had scampered off to the small chicken coop behind the cabin, Zara turned to Jack. "He's right, you know. You did make me smile again." Jack ran a hand through his hair, looking more uncomfortable facing this conversation than he had facing armed outlaws. "Zara, I'm not good at this. Family, settling down, I wouldn't know where to start." "You've made a pretty good beginning already," she pointed out. "You protected us, taught us, made us feel safe. That's what family does." "And when the next bunch of outlaws needs hunting?" Jack asked. "Would you want to be married to a man who disappears for weeks, maybe months at a time? A man who might not come home at all one day?" The word "married" hung between them, neither acknowledging that he'd been the first to speak it aloud. "There are other ways to use your skills," Zara said carefully. "The territorial governor is always looking for good men to serve as marshals. You could have a badge again, like your brother, a home to return to." Jack was quiet for a long moment, considering. "It's been a long time since I thought about a future beyond the next bounty," he admitted finally. "Not sure I remember how." Zara took a step closer to him. "Then let me help you remember." She raised a hand to his cheek, feeling the rough stubble beneath her palm. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the air between them charged with possibility. Then Jack lowered his head and kissed her, gently at first, then with growing certainty. Zara responded in kind, her arms winding around his neck as if they belonged there. When they finally parted, Jack rested his forehead against hers. "I can't promise I'll be any good at this," he murmured. "I'm not asking for promises," Zara replied. "Just a chance for all of us." From the chicken coop, Ellie's voice called out excitedly, "Mama, Mr. Jack." The rooster laid an egg. They both laughed, the tension broken. "Might need to teach him a few things about chickens," Jack observed dryly. "Among other things," Zara agreed with a smile. "So will you stay, at least long enough to see if this could work?" Jack looked at the cabin, at Ellie running toward them with his discovery, and finally at Zara, whose eyes held hope he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. "Yes," he said simply. "I'll stay." True to Jack's prediction, Territorial Marshal Davis arrived the following day with 3 deputies. They took charge of Hank Blackwell and the bodies of his men, documenting the events of the shootout with official precision. "You've done the territory a service, Porter," Marshal Davis said as they prepared to depart. "Blackwell's reign of terror is over." "What about the remaining members of his gang?" Jack asked. 2 were captured in Silver Creek yesterday," Davis reported. "Apparently, they got nervous when Blackwell didn't return and tried to rob the bank for traveling money. Sheriff there shot 1 dead and captured the others." "And the 3rd?" Zara asked, standing beside Jack. "Still at large, but he won't get far," Davis assured them. "Every lawman in the territory has his description. It's just a matter of time." As the marshal's party rode away with their prisoner, Zara felt a weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time since Thomas's death, she allowed herself to believe in a future without fear. That evening, After Ellie had been tucked into bed with a story about brave cowboys and the women who loved them, Jack and Zara sat on the cabin's small porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "I spoke with Marshal Davis about territorial appointments," Jack said quietly. "He thinks the governor might be amenable to appointing me sheriff in Prosperity. Current one's retiring next month." Zara's heart leapt, but she kept her voice casual. "Prosperity's a nice town. Good place to raise a child." Jack nodded, his eyes on the distant mountains. "It'd mean wearing a badge again. Regular hours, more or less. A proper house in town." "Sounds like you're considering it seriously," Zara observed. "I am." He turned to look at her, his expression more open than she'd ever seen it. "But I need to know if it's what you want too. You and Ellie." Zara considered the question honestly. "After Thomas died, all I wanted was to keep Ellie safe. I never thought beyond that, but now." She looked up at the stars. "Now I want more. I want a home, a community. I want Ellie to grow up with friends and school and normal childhood things. And—" She met Jack's gaze directly. "I want to see what might grow between us, given time and peace." Jack took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against hers. "I can't replace Thomas," he said softly. "Wouldn't try to." "I'm not asking you to," Zara assured him. "Thomas will always be part of me, part of Ellie. But my heart isn't buried with him, Jack. There's room for new love, different but no less real." Jack's smile was slow but genuine. "Then I accept Marshal Davis's offer to recommend me for the position." He hesitated, then added, "And if the appointment comes through, would you consider? That is, would you and Ellie?" Zara laughed softly, delighted by his uncharacteristic awkwardness. "Jack Porter, if you're trying to ask if we'll come with you to Prosperity, the answer is yes." Relief washed over his face. "Good. That's good." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the stars brighten against the darkening sky. Jack's arm found its way around Zara's shoulders, and she leaned into him, savoring the sense of security and possibility. "You know," Jack said eventually, "your friend Ellie thinks the rooster laid that egg. Might need to set him straight on a few things about life." Zara chuckled. "He has time to learn, and now, thanks to you, he'll have that time." Jack shook his head slightly. "Thanks to us," he corrected. "You're the bravest woman I've ever known." Zara Anderson. "And you, Jack Porter, are the best man I never expected to meet," she replied, tilting her face up to his. Under the vast Colorado sky, they sealed their new beginning with a kiss, while inside the cabin, Ellie slept peacefully, no longer haunted by nightmares of pursuit and fear. 3 months later, Sheriff Jack Porter stood on the porch of his new home in Prosperity, watching as Zara directed the placement of furniture being delivered from Denver. The house, a proper 2-story structure with a white picket fence, had been part of his compensation package as the town's new law enforcement officer. The territorial governor had been more than happy to appoint Jack to the position after Marshal Davis's glowing recommendation. The citizens of Prosperity had welcomed their new sheriff with enthusiasm, particularly when they learned of his role in bringing down the notorious Blackwell Gang. Ellie, now approaching his 4th birthday, had adapted to town life with the resilience of childhood. He attended the small school 3 days a week, had made friends among the local children, and spent his free time either helping Jack at the sheriff's office or learning to read with Zara, who had taken a position teaching at the school. "The table goes in the dining room by the east window," Zara instructed the delivery men, her natural authority evident in her calm, clear directions. Jack smiled, admiring her confidence and grace. In the months since the showdown at the cabin, Zara had blossomed, shedding the constant vigilance of a hunted woman and embracing her new life with characteristic determination. "Sheriff," a voice called, interrupting Jack's thoughts. He turned to see his deputy, a young man named Charlie Wells, hurrying up the street. "What is it, Charlie?" Jack asked, recognizing the excitement in the deputy's face. "Telegram from Denver," Charlie reported, handing over the yellow paper. "Thought you'd want to see it right away." Jack unfolded the telegram and read the brief message. "Hank Blackwell hanged this morning. Stop justice. Served stop. Regards, Marshall Davis." A complex mixture of emotions washed over Jack's satisfaction, relief, and a certain emptiness now that his long quest for justice had reached its conclusion. He folded the telegram carefully and tucked it into his pocket. "Everything all right, Sheriff?" Charlie asked, noting Jack's expression. "Yes," Jack said after a moment. "Just the final chapter of an old story." Charlie nodded, understanding without details. "I'll head back to the office, keep an eye on things." As the deputy departed, Zara approached, wiping her hands on her apron. "What was that about?" she asked, noticing the thoughtful expression on Jack's face. Wordlessly, Jack handed her the telegram. Zara read it quickly, her face solemn. "How do you feel?" she asked quietly. Jack considered the question. "I thought I'd feel more. Something. Triumph maybe, but mostly I just feel relief that it's truly over." Zara slipped her arm through his. "For Ali and me, it's been over since the day you found us. This just makes it official." Jack nodded, drawing strength from her presence. "You know, Will, my brother, he always said revenge was a poor substitute for justice. Took me a long time to understand what he meant. And now," Zara prompted gently, "now I think he was right. Bringing Blackwell to justice wasn't about evening the score. It was about making sure he couldn't hurt anyone else." Jack looked down at Zara, his eyes softening. "And about finding something worth living for, not just something worth dying for." Zara smiled up at him, the love in her eyes unmistakable. "I'm glad you found us, Jack Porter." "So am I," he replied honestly. From inside the house came the sound of childish laughter as Ali played with his new puppy, a gift from one of the grateful townspeople. The simple sound of happiness was more rewarding to Jack than any bounty he'd ever collected. That evening, after Ali had been tucked into bed in his new room, Jack and Zara sat on the porch swing, enjoying the cool evening air and the peaceful sounds of the small town preparing for night. "I never thought I'd have this again," Zara admitted, her head resting against Jack's shoulder. "A real home, a sense of belonging." "Neither did I," Jack agreed. He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object. "Which is why I wanted to ask you something." Zara sat up straighter, her eyes widening as Jack opened his hand to reveal a simple gold ring with a small diamond. "It was my mother's," Jack explained, suddenly nervous. "Not fancy, but solid, like she was." He took a deep breath. "Zara, these past months have shown me what I was missing all those years on the trail. You and Ali have become my family in all the ways that matter. I'd be honored if you'd consider making it official." Tears welled in Zara's eyes as she looked from the ring to Jack's face. "Are you certain?" she asked. "Being a lawman's wife isn't always easy. Being alone is harder," Jack said simply. "I love you, Zara, you and Ali both. I want to build a life with you if you'll have me." Zara's smile was radiant through her tears. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, Jack Porter, I will marry you." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Jack felt a sense of rightness and completion he'd never known before. The long, lonely years of hunting outlaws, seeking vengeance for his brother's death, had led him here to this woman, this child, this life he'd never imagined possible. "Mama!" a small voice called from the doorway. They turned to see Ali standing there in his nightshirt, rubbing his eyes sleepily. "What is it, sweetheart?" Zara asked, wiping away her happy tears. "Is Mr. Jack going to be my papa now?" the boy asked, his directness catching them both by surprise. Jack glanced at Zara, who nodded encouragingly. He knelt down to Ellie's level, choosing his words carefully. "I'd like to be, if that's all right with you," Jack said gently. "Your real papa will always be your papa too, in your heart and in your memories. But if you'd let me, I'd be proud to be your papa now." Ellie considered this solemnly, then nodded. "I think my first papa would say it's okay. He told me a papa's job is to keep mama safe and teach me important things. You do that already." Jack swallowed the lump in his throat. "That's right, partner, and I promise I always will." Ellie's face brightened. "Then it's settled. Can I tell my friends at school tomorrow?" Zara laughed, the sound like music to Jack's ears. "Yes, you can tell them. Now back to bed with you, young man." After Ellie had been tucked in again with promises that they would discuss wedding plans in the morning, Jack and Zara returned to the porch. The stars above Prosperity seemed especially bright that night, as if celebrating with them. "You know," Zara said thoughtfully as they resumed their place on the swing, "when Thomas died, I thought my life was over. All I had left was keeping Ellie safe." She twined her fingers with Jack's, the ring catching the lamplight. "I never imagined I could find love again, or that it would come in the form of a bounty hunter with a troubled past and a heart bigger than he let on." Jack chuckled softly. "And I never thought I'd trade my saddle for a sheriff's badge and a family." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Life has a way of surprising you." "Indeed it does, Sheriff Porter," Zara agreed, leaning in for a kiss. "Indeed it does." As the town of Prosperity settled into its nighttime rhythm around them, Jack Porter held the woman he loved and thought about the strange, winding path that had led him here. From vengeance to justice, from loneliness to love, from a man with nothing to lose to a man with everything to live for. The journey wasn't over. Life never was that simple, but for the first time in years, Jack looked forward to each new day with hope instead of grim determination. And as Zara nestled against him, her hand warm in his, he knew with absolute certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. 3 years later, Jack stood on the same porch, watching as 6-year-old Ellie carefully showed his 2-year-old sister Sarah how to pet the family dog without pulling its ears. The scene filled him with a contentment he'd once believed impossible. The wedding had been simple but joyous, with the entire town turning out to celebrate. Zara had been radiant in a cream-colored dress ordered from Denver, and Ellie had proudly carried the rings as Jack's best man. Life as Prosperity's sheriff had its challenges, but the work satisfied Jack in ways bounty hunting never had. Instead of pursuing justice after crimes were committed, he could often prevent trouble before it started. His reputation had spread throughout the territory, and Prosperity had become known as a town where the law was respected and enforced with firm but fair hands. Zara thrived as the town's schoolteacher, her natural intelligence and compassion making her beloved by students and parents alike. When Sarah had been born, she'd taken a brief respite from teaching but had returned to the schoolhouse with renewed enthusiasm, often bringing their daughter with her. "Papa, Sarah wants to ride the horse," Ellie called, interrupting Jack's reflections. Jack grinned and descended the porch steps. "Does she now? Well, let's see what we can arrange." He scooped up his daughter, who squealed with delight as he placed her on his shoulders. "There you go, princess. Highest horse in the county." Zara emerged from the house, wiping flour from her hands. "Don't get her too excited before supper, Jack. You know how she gets." "Yes, madam," Jack replied with a wink that made Zara roll her eyes affectionately. As they gathered around the dinner table that evening, a family created not by blood, but by choice and circumstance and love, Jack looked at the faces illuminated by the warm lamplight. Ellie, growing tall and strong, with his father's blue eyes but Jack's mannerisms. Little Sarah, with Zara's dark hair and determined spirit, and Zara herself, still as beautiful to him as the day he'd first seen her, standing defiant in that besieged cabin. "What are you thinking about, Sheriff?" Zara asked, noticing his thoughtful expression. Jack smiled, the answer simple and true. "Just how lucky I am." Later, as moonlight filtered through the bedroom window, Jack held Zara close and thought about the long, strange journey that had brought him to this life. How a quest for vengeance had led him to a woman and child in desperate need. How protecting them had healed something broken inside him. How justice had eventually been served, not through personal revenge but through the proper workings of the law. "Are you happy, Jack?" Zara murmured sleepily against his chest. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "More than I ever thought possible." And it was true. The restlessness that had driven him for so many years had been replaced by a different kind of purpose, protecting his town, raising his family, building a life of meaning and connection. Outside, the vast Colorado sky stretched endlessly above prosperity, stars glittering like promises kept and hopes fulfilled. Jack Porter, once a lone avenger, now husband, father, and guardian of the peace, drifted to sleep with gratitude in his heart and the woman he loved in his arms. The journey that had begun with a single gunshot on a dusty Colorado plain had led him home at last.